Start today in chapter 2 of the Song of Prayer. This chapter introduces forgiveness in light of prayer. So our goal really is to experience enlightenment in prayer. And it is in this enlightenment that we see forgiveness of ourselves. And it is in seeing forgiveness of ourselves that we see the diminishing of all difficulties, all differences, and all distinctions other than the one truth. The one truth is seen in prayer. After that, let's say, and the ladder of prayer, at the top of the ladder of prayer, is the realization that prayer is for real. In other words, prayer is the one truth. It's the same as God. It's the same as us. It's the same as all truth. Prayer is that truth. So prayer survives through forgiveness and into healing. That's the third part of the Song of Prayer. The way that we experience it as humans is in three parts. So we're going to see today the second part of the Song of Prayer as humans experience it as we learn this process of forgiveness. So forgiveness is the goal of prayer at first. Second is healing is another goal of prayer. And miracle-mindedness is also a goal of prayer. A couple other people have come in. Let me see who that is. So we also have iPhone, which is probably Mateo. Is that?
Good morning.
And Debbie. Hi, Debbie. And I think it's Mateo on the other iPhone, it says, but his sound isn't hooked up. So I don't know if you can hear us even. So I'll continue. I'll assume he's going to fix that. If you can hear us, Mateo, we let me see if I can write him a note actually. Yeah. iPhone, right? Let's see if that works for him. Now he has sound. Okay, good. Mateo, you have sound now? Probably. Maybe. Muted anyways, but I think you could probably hear me now though. Okay, I mean, this is from the email that I sent yesterday, last night, or sometime before today anyway. We need forgiveness to achieve the goal of prayer. The goal is moving goal. So prayer is a resolution of realization of the truth of peace. Peace is further realized in the joy of forgiveness, and forgiveness is further realized in the love of healing. And then we become more open-minded, therefore, to the one truth, which doesn't really require thought. It is the one thought. The one thought is the same as peace, the same as joy, the same as love, and the same as prayer. So you just not used to thinking about the non-dual thought system. And so for the time being, that may seem a little confusing, but it isn't really confusing. So don't let it bother you. Simply stick with the human way of seeing it is there's a step and then another step and another step, and let the completion process open your mind, because that's all that's in the way is our mind trying to process this and evaluate it and analyze it and make sense out of something that already made sense further than we can ever make sense out of it. We don't have to really work at it, but it seems like we do though. So it's normal. Don't worry about it. It will go away. We will see also that the answer to our prayer is given to us. So the question isn't the difficult part when we see the answer. The question and the answer turn out to be two sides of the same thing. In dualism, it seems like there has to be a question for there to be an answer. In non-dualism, the answer and the question are the same thing. So we don't need to concern ourselves about that either. That will also go away in time. So just let that happen. Don't worry about it. And as we read through forgiveness, hopefully some of this will jar loose any of the barriers to seeing your relaxed, peaceful self, simply enjoying being aware of a greater truth than you had been before. And that will be a renewing experience, an enlightening experience, and it will make peace a lot easier for you to be able to maintain in your mind, or for your mind to be maintained in the awareness of peace, because the awareness of peace is now the one thought, or the one truth, the one peace, the one joy, the one love, the one healing, the one prayer, and so on. So we pray for peace and to be still and to hear his voice. It comes from lesson 221. And here's the beginning of our prayer. Father, I come to you today to seek the peace that you alone can give. I come in silence, in the quiet of my heart, the deep recesses of my mind. I wait and listen for your voice. So that's the only thing that we really need to do. Anything else that we really need to do is just sort of a substitute for that. That's the one thing that we all really need to do, is just to simply allow our mind to come into stillness and to listen for this guiding voice. The guiding voice may not seem to be English sometimes. It may seem to be sort of a picture. It may seem to be sort of an intuition or whatever, but it should enlighten us. It should bring greater peace. And in bringing greater peace, this is how we begin to recognize the one truth is not different from the whole truth. The one truth and the whole truth are the same thing. So we begin to recognize what I say is simply a non-dual understanding. In other words, it's the opposite to the truth. We simply see it's whole. It can't be divided. It can't even really be explained, therefore, in terms of using language. It simply has to be experienced. That's the only direct connection that we'll ever have, is that actual connection, which is totally given to us. We can't make it up. We can't even really describe it very well. We do our best as teachers, and as we have conversations with each other and so on and so forth. But we really sort of have to work a little bit to keep in mind that we don't want to deviate from the simplicity of it, because the simplicity of it is even more simple than, in fact, our minds can comprehend. We read of contrast, forgiveness, and unforgiveness. And an unforgiving thought is one which makes a judgment that will not raise to doubt, although it is true. Although it is not true. So the judgment itself is what is not true. A judgment is an unforgiving thought, and a judgment that is cast upon or cast in the way of the truth is what really happens. The unforgiving thought preserves the projection, tightening its chains so that distortions are more veiled and more obscure and less easily accessible to doubt, further kept from reason. What can come between a fixed projection and the aim that it has chosen as its wanted goal is a question. And if you click on that question, you will see, I have to click on it again because I can't see the hyperlink without doing that. It goes to this article about it goes to a section rather about what is forgiveness, which is one of the concepts that is explained in the workbook. I believe it's at lesson 221, I believe it is. Yes, part 2 of the workbook. Yeah, 221 is where it comes in the workbook, between 220 and 221. And if you read that over, that will help you to see how, in fact, that forgiveness has been defined. We're going to do that here also, though. This is also another way to see how forgiveness is defined, is to simply read through the Song of Prayers chapter on forgiveness. This is not the chapter yet, by the way. This is just my notes. An unforgiving thought does many things, and in frantic action, what it does is pursue goals other than the truth, twisting and overturning what it sees as interfering with its chosen path. In other words, the unforgiving thought is not choosing to be peaceful, is not choosing to be forgiving, is not choosing to be healing. The unforgiving thought is choosing to find something difficult, something wrong, something different, something changing. It's not intended by the mind that's lost in separation. It's not intended to be a healing thought or a joining thought. It's not intended to be true. It's intended to deal with the situation or circumstance, people, places, and things that are perceived outside of the truth. So it merely looks. What does forgiveness do, on the other hand, is still and quietly does nothing. It offends no aspect of reality, nor seeks to twist its appearances as it likes. It merely looks and waits and judges not. He who would not forgive must judge, for he must justify his failure to forgive. But he who would forgive himself must learn to welcome the truth exactly as it is. And this is something we talked about during the chapters. As we were reading through the chapters, I was pointing out to us as we got into the 20s, where this is really discussed in great depth, that we mustn't allow ourselves to reduce the truth or change the truth or to in any way alter the experiences of the increasing of peace, the increasing of joy, the increasing of kindness in our hearts. This is the way to go. That's the direction to go. That's going towards the truth. Towards the truth is always going to be enlightening us in that way. That's the path of enlightenment. The path that we are on without that is random and is it's incapable of being followed through for any purpose greater than whatever its aim seems to be. And even that will normally fail. Even that will normally fail when we need to collaborate and get together in terms of being able to come to a truth that includes equality and includes peace for all. We tend to fail at being able to do that. Even in our small communities, oftentimes, even our families, oftentimes, we tend to fail to be able to do that. So do nothing then and let forgiveness show you what to do, because through him, who is your guide, your savior and protector, strong in hope and certain of your ultimate success, he has forgiven you already, for such is his function given him by God. Now must you share his function and forgive whom he has saved, whose sinlessness he sees, and whom he honors as the Son of God. You may remember from last time that we read some similar language to that in the first part, in the first chapter. In the first chapter, we were seeing that, in fact, as we begin to understand the peace of prayer, as we begin to understand the levels of prayer, we get to a level of prayer in which peace is now something that is easily established in our mind, because we have come through the process. Perhaps we even started with an enemy in our mind, but we came through this process of allowing ourselves to see forgiveness for what they seem to have done, to realize that what we have done that is really harmful is what we have done to ourselves about what we believe about this other person, place, or thing that has been in our mind, that we have been occupied in our mind. We've been occupying our mind with that disgust or that anger or that sadness or that grief in some way that's taken us away from this peaceful understanding, where we can see that doing nothing and allowing forgiveness to show us the way is in fact exactly what prayer is taking us, or where we're going to with prayer, as we come to the peacefulness of realizing we don't have any enemies, of realizing there isn't any difficulties put before us to torment us or to make us insane, that we, in fact, we're the ones doing that to our own selves. We're the ones that are doing that to our own selves in such a way as that it's been not obvious to us until we began to study and see, in fact, that every time that we get upset, when we calm down and when we allow ourselves to come to a peaceful place in our mind, we see there's no real point in holding on to this great upset. We may still need to do something about the situation to remove ourselves from it in some cases, but in fact, there's no point to us stewing over it and being all ruminating and festering all about what the past was all about, because we find that we need to move on into a safer place, into a place where we're strengthened. And in that place, then this enemy doesn't really have a place. And so, in fact, we begin to eliminate those thoughts from our mind because they don't actually help us. In fact, they actually hurt our mind. They actually keep us separated, and they keep us in a state of upset and frustration and resentments and bitterness and so on like that. Okay, I see by phone, You're Mateo, right? Put down Mateo because I think you are. Hope you can hear me now. Okay, so in fact, what could you want forgiveness cannot give? Do you want peace? Forgiveness offers it. Do you want happiness? A quiet mind, a certainty of purpose, and a sense of worth and a beauty that transcends the world? Do you want care and safety and warmth of sure protection always? Do you want a quietness that cannot be disturbed, a gentleness that never can be hurt, a deep abiding comfort, and a rest so perfect it can never be upset? All this forgiveness offers you and more. Through miracles, you accept God's forgiveness by extending it to others. So our purpose now becomes to extend what it is that we learn to others. Some people were doing the meditations with me and learning about meditations and some of the techniques of mindfulness over the past several weeks on Wednesdays. And we were finding that, in fact, most of us were having stories about how we were finding that this peacefulness that we would find in meditation and mindfulness would be sustaining us a whole lot better than what we had been doing, whatever that was before that. And we were finding that, in fact, we probably were improving over the course of those 8 weeks that we were doing that together. Next time we're going to be doing, starting next Wednesday, we're going to be looking at The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And I'll actually be playing that by the recordings that I have from his book. And then we'll have plenty of time also to discuss each one of those as we do that. So we'll have a few minutes before it starts to discuss any questions that we might have had from the previous meeting or the email in between with the meditation. And then we'll play the recording, which is about 50 minutes. And then we'll have another 15 minutes or so that we can ask questions or point out things or whatever we want to do before we leave. So today we're going to focus on forgiveness this way. Forgiveness recognizes what you thought that your brother did to you has not occurred. In other words, it recognizes that you're looking at an illusion whenever you think that something is wrong. Nothing can actually be wrong in truth. In reality, all of whatever could be wrong has to be separate from God because it can't be in God. And so therefore it has to have been seen to be imagined to be separating us from God. And that's exactly what our imagination is doing by believing that we are people, by believing that we live on a planet, by believing that we live in a solar system that is in a vast galaxy someplace in the Milky Way. And there's millions of other galaxies out there. And there's probably aliens and who knows what out there. And it doesn't really matter because none of it's real. None of that actually is happening. All that's happening really is this story is made up. It's absolutely a dream. And the physical reality that we see is mostly even not there. All we're really doing is we're seeing the representative symbols of our reality that is made up in the mind that has decided to leave God's presence to see for itself what it can be on its own. And that's exactly what we're doing every time that we think we have an urgent thing that we have to accomplish, every time we think that we have something that we have to do. That's exactly what we're doing. We're making ourselves more important than the truth, and we're reducing the truth to see how important we are in the world outside ourselves. That's what makes the world real to us. And what makes the world seem illusory to us is that we begin to see the emptiness of it has been filled with our own use of our mind as it is separate from God in the way that we think, and that in fact our thoughts are really just fragments of thought. They don't really actually make sense when we put them all together. We actually end up still with a universe that doesn't work, still with a system that doesn't work, still with a government that doesn't work, still with a local community that doesn't work, still with our families perhaps don't even work sometimes. So forgiveness merely sees that that's its faults and therefore lets it go. Allow yourself to see through forgiveness. You won't certainly be hurting yourself if you allow yourself to see the illusions that make up your reality in your mind. You certainly won't be you're hurting yourself if you allow yourself to see that they're illusions. We're not asking you for your money. We're not asking for your loyalty to anything. We're simply asking you to look inside yourself and see for yourself what really seems to be more true than what you have made up about your importance in your jobs, in your families, in your communities, and so on and so forth, where all those things are barely getting you by. Whereas this peacefulness that you find in realization of forgiveness of all that allows you to be renewed and strengthened, and allows you also to begin to recognize the whole truth rather than as it seems to have been divided up as though we're supposed to be able to figure it out from all the things that are going in different directions. So forgiveness begins as we become willing for unifying in the holy perceptions of peace and joy, and as we cease our prideful self-will and projections of guilt, and as we are released from guilt within, and as we are filled now with increasing spiritual awareness, forgiveness then is the content of our mind, not about our past behaviors. And looking beyond these behaviors, the Course focuses on our innocence. Guiltlessness allows us then to perceive everyone within a non-judgmental vision powered by our Holy Spirit. That may be a ways away. I'm still working on that also myself. There are some people I can work with very easily and stay within that Holy Spirit, stay within the truth. And there are other people that I find it difficult to do that with. And I can't really point out exactly why different people seem to be difficult. It isn't them. It's the way I process it. I can stay within the truth if I want to. I simply don't seem to know how to do it sometimes. And I simply get a little bit lost in what is going on and seem to not be able to find the right things to say or do, or just the peacefulness, just to be quiet. Sometimes that's the best thing to do. So let's start out with the introduction to forgiveness. We'll look a little bit at how that illusion begins to build itself in opposition to forgiveness. And we'll also then go on to the area here of forgiving ourselves, which is probably the most interesting part of the whole course, I think. Would somebody like to read this first page on forgiveness as an introduction and also about the illusions? Great, thanks. You got it, Sheila.
Okay, thanks, Eric. Forgiveness, the introduction. Forgiveness offers wings to prayer to make its rising easy and its progress swift. Without its strong support, it would be vain to try to rise above prayer's bottom step, or even to attempt to climb at all. Forgiveness is prayer's ally, sister in the plan for your salvation. Both must come to hold you up and keep your feet secure, your purpose steadfast and unchangeable. Behold the greatest help that God ordained to be with you until you reach to him. Illusion's end will come with this. Unlike the timeless nature of its sister, prayer, forgiveness has an end, for it becomes unneeded when the rising up is done. Yet now that it has a purpose beyond which you cannot go, nor have you need to go. Accomplish this and you have been redeemed. Accomplish this and you have been transformed. Accomplish this and you will save the world. The illusion of needs. You who want peace can find it only by complete forgiveness. No learning is acquired by anyone unless he wants to learn it and believes in some way that he needs it. You believe in what you value. If you are afraid, you are valuing wrongly. Your understanding will then inevitably value wrongly, and by endowing all thoughts with equal power, will inevitably destroy peace. Wisdom is knowing I am nothing. Love is knowing I am everything. And between the two, my life moves. Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. Back to lesson 122. Forgiveness offers everything I want. Forgiveness lets the veil be lifted up that hides the face of Christ from those who look with unforgiving eyes upon the world. It lets you recognize the Son of God and clears your memory of all dead thoughts so that remembrance of your Father can rise above the threshold of your mind. What would you want forgiveness cannot give? What gifts but these are worthy to be sought? What fancied value, trivial effect, or transient promise never to be kept, can hold more hope than what forgiveness brings. God's plan for your salvation cannot change, nor can it fail. Be thankful it remains exactly as He planned it. Changelessly, it stands before you like an open door, with warmth and welcoming calling from beyond the doorway, bidding you to enter in and make yourself at home where you belong.
Thank you, Sheila. And I'll just remind everyone that I have put links into the document. I've linked it to the new software version of the Course in Miracles for the Foundation for Inner Peace, exactly the same as our book. And I've linked all these links that are mentioning the heading of the sections, or a article handout, or in a chapter from the Course in Miracles. For example, this illusion of needs is described for us in chapter 1, section 6. And also the quotes, usually I bothered to find out where they came from exactly. I took them either myself from that place, or I found them at some other time, put them in here, and now I've linked them to a source where you can go and read about them a little bit more if you want to. Usually also the lessons. In this case, this is the name of the lesson, and lesson 122, here's the paragraphs that you can link to directly to that paragraph, so you can see it in context with the rest of that. And sometimes I've also linked some of the terminology. In this case, I'm not, here are a few of them. Back here, a few of them are also linked to the terminology. So you can see where specifically that comes from in terms of putting it back into context where it came from. Sometimes that's useful. I know when I was researching, putting these things together, I used that a lot. And I kind of wish that this software had been available before, because it makes it very much easier to search for things. And then in the search to find this very more specific part of it that I want to actually use sometimes. And sometimes I get, well, of course, I can just read through all of these sometimes and see if in fact I really understood what I thought I was looking for. Sometimes I've actually found out that I didn't understand what I thought I was looking for. So, for example, I thought that I was going to describe what's the difference between the soul and spirit. And then as I read through all the literature that's available in the Foundation for Inner Peace, I decided not to do that, because I decided that I feel like I know what I'm talking about, but that in fact, there's no clear-cut answers in the Course in Miracles as the Foundation for Inner Peace presents it, as to if there is any difference between spirit and soul. So I decided not to bother talking about that, because it really wasn't necessary anyway. I was just looking for something to see if in fact it was what I kind of thought it was. And I do think it is kind of what I thought it was, but I decided not to talk about it because I just like to take everything as much directly from the Course in Miracles as I can when I'm teaching about the Course in Miracles. So next we're going to look at forgiveness of yourself. And as I said, I think this is the most interesting part of the Course in Miracles. Really is we have trouble seeing forgiveness for ourselves. We tend, when we look at what our need is, we tend to make it out to be something other than that we need forgiveness. We tend to make it out that somebody has to be straightened out, or something else has to occur other than that we have to simply let go of our upset, which is our unforgiveness about ourselves. So all of our upsets are actually representing all of our unforgiveness about our own self. They don't actually represent the troubles and trials and tribulations of being human. They simply represent the truth. In truth, they simply represent what keeps us from seeing ourselves truly in our prayerful place in the creating with God. This is what blocks us. And there are many vast number of different ones that we call fear and guilt and blame and shame and pride and so on and so forth. It's an almost never ending list of different things that we can attribute to our problems. In reality, we have only one problem, and that one problem is that we tend to hold on to this idea that we've done something wrong, or that somebody has done us wrong. One or the other seems to be true in most of our problem, and most of our problem therefore represents these kind of issues. It could be as little as a contradiction. It could be as little as a confusion of some kind. It could be as big as murder. It could be as big as adultery. It could be a lot of things that could be much worse seemingly than the little contradictions or the little confusions. So in fact, forgiveness, however, is our side of the street, and people that are in the 12 steps know that when we say our side of the street, we have to stay on our side of the street. They know that means some serious work probably has to be done, because probably on my mind is so distorted that I can't even see what is my side of the street. And that's certainly how I started out when I looked at the 12 steps, not knowing what is my side of the street. I was oftentimes confused and oftentimes finding some kind of contradictions and oftentimes blocking myself from seeing the simplicity of how the 12 steps works. And I also therefore could miss the simplicity of how A Course in Miracles works. We said at the very beginning, it is meaning to accept the atonement for ourselves, which means simply that we must value peace above all upset and conditioning and worries. And therefore, when we do value peace above all that, then we are more open-minded automatically. And then our honesty also becomes much more clear to us as to what is honest about ourselves. And then we're able to see the need for our forgiveness of ourselves a whole lot more easily that way. So that brings us to forgiveness then, and we begin to see what forgiveness really means. Perhaps we read the course, perhaps we read the Song of Prayer also at the end of the chapters. Perhaps we do all the workbook exercises, and we really truly begin to see that forgiveness is really very much more simple than we could ever have imagined. But we also see that we tend to forget it very easily because we're still deciding against the truth. We're still deciding to change the truth according to what seems to be our need. And our need seems to be distorted. It seems to be not as simple as enlightenment and peace. It seems to be much more complicated than that. And we don't know that we're making that decision until we actually get well into the course, perhaps, well into the workbook, perhaps, well into the reading of the text and the Song of Prayer and so on for several times, perhaps, until we really begin to see that we are the ones that are creating our own madness and our own separating thoughts and our own difficulties. And we've been always doing that. And then we begin to see that these character defects and these shortcomings that we saw if we looked through these steps with our sponsors and stuff like that, if we were in the 12-step programs, or if we were in some four agreements or whatever we were using before this, we begin to see that, in fact, this is taking us a little further than all that by clarifying this simplicity of a non-dual status of our mind. We begin to see that the clarity is supposed to always be there. And we begin to see that, in fact, we've been failing to keep our mind in this decision-making process to stay within the satisfaction of that one-mindedness. And we begin to see that it was our own weakness that we made, which we then wallow in. We then fail because we keep ourselves weak. And the simplicity of the Course in Miracles and the acceptance of the atonement plan for myself strengthens me the whole time. And so I begin to see that this is yet perhaps a little bit deeper use of the third through the 12 steps in the 12-step program, or up through the Mastery of Self in the Four Agreements series of books, and so on like that. And there are others also, Buddhism also, and so on and so on and so on. There are many other forms of use of this same universal process. I happen to only have done a few of them. I happen to have studied Buddhism a little bit, so I can see the truth about it. I use the Four Agreements and the other advanced books from that series of books by the Ruiz family, and I teach A Course in Miracles, and so I can see that the same truth is available also in the 12 steps also. So I can see the same truth is available in all those different ways, that the illusion of the world outside myself is so compelling to me that I believe that, in fact, I have to invest myself in it. And that's what's causing scarcity. And that's what's causing the difficulties of my mind to see that I need to rest in the truth rather than to be frantic and live in the chaos of reducing the truth to something other than what really is going on. So let's look at forgiveness of yourself. I'd ask if somebody would read that page. And at the bottom of that, we'll see this section from lesson 134 and also from chapter 2 on letting us perceive forgiveness more easily. Somebody read that page. And also, in fact, you can go on to the next page too, because we really only have to stop and talk. I don't need to talk again, I think, until we get down to prayer here. Would you like to volunteer?
I can go if I
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just move your little picture. That's actually, it's perfect right there. Thank
I'm going
you.
to turn off the
Forgive
picture this time.
And that's perfect. It's perfect as it is. It just fits right on, just right above the first lines. That's awesome. Forgiveness of yourself. No gift of heaven has been more misunderstood than has forgiveness. It has, in fact, become a scourge, a curse when it was meant to be blessed, a cruel mockery of grace, a parody upon the holy peace of God. Yet those who have not yet chosen to begin the steps of prayer cannot but use it thus. Forgiveness, kindness is obscure at first because salvation is not understood nor truly sought for. What was meant to heal is used to hurt because forgiveness is not wanted. Guilt becomes salvation, and the remedy appears to be a terrible alternative to life. Forgiveness to destroy will therefore suit the purpose of the world for far better than its true objective and the honest means by which this goal is reached. Forgiveness to destroy will overlook no sin, no crime, no guilt that it can seek and find and love. Dear to its heart, its error and mistakes loom large and grow and swell within its sight. It carefully picks out all evil things and overlooks the loving as a plague, a hateful thing of danger and of death. Forgiveness to destroy is death, and this it sees in all its looks upon and hates. God's mercy has become a twisted knife that would destroy the Holy Son he loves. Would you forgive yourself for doing this? Then learn that God has given you the means by which you can return to him in peace. Do not see error. Do not make it real. Select the loving and forgive the sin by choosing in its place the face of Christ. How otherwise can prayer return to God? He loves his Son. Can you remember him and hate what he created? You'll hate his Father if you hate his Son, the Son he loves. For as you see the Son, you see yourself, and as you see yourself is God to you. Let me perceive forgiveness as it is. Let us review the meaning of forgive, for it is apt to be distorted and to be perceived as something that entails an unfair sacrifice of righteous wrath, a gift unjustified and undeserved, and a complete denial of the truth. In such a view, forgiveness must be seen as more eccentric folly, and so this course will appear to rest salvation on a whim. The twisted view of what forgiveness means is easily corrected when you can accept the fact that pardon is not asked for what is true. It must be limited to what is false. The major difficulty that you find is genuine forgiveness on your part is that you still believe you must forgive the truth and not illusions. As miracle workers, we'll recognize that the opposite of our folly, frailty, and weakness is innocence. Innocence is our strength. Innocence cannot experience fear, nor put belief in that there are sinners. Practice wanting holy innocence. Practice moving the lies of the ego into the light so that these are recognized for what they are. Lessons that respond to learning in the atoning. Defend the truth by denying that error has any power. Use denial not to hide from the truth, but to correct errors. This is the proper use of denial.
So innocence doesn't change the truth, doesn't change simplicity, allows things to be simple, and in fact allows things to be peacefully simple. So innocence is not necessarily a thought system. Innocence is the simplicity of accepting the thought system that makes things simple. So I've done my best to make sure that we see that even though the course seems to be complicated with all the hundreds and hundreds of pages that are being divided into chapters and different subjects and so on and so forth, yet there's a simplicity behind it all. And innocence is the ability to see that simplicity. Innocence is the ability to see that because there's no need to judge anything other than to see the simplicity. So simplicity is what the prayerful mind is simple in that fashion. It's not complicated. In other words, it's more inclined to be at peace and to be realizing joy and to be seeing that even if other things seem to be going on in the world that don't seem to be peaceful and don't seem to be joyous. And of course, the world is like that. But in fact, when we see those that we can help, then we see through that, we see through the difficulties in their life to the truth about them. And that's how come we can be helpful, because we can become genuine and authentic when in fact we can be helpful. So that's another way that we can see that we've come to a place within our mind which is more peaceful and more enlightening, is because we can see the ease of helping others that are open to wanting to see what the truth about themselves is. And that's all we really can do to help anyone, is to help them see the truth about themselves. Because in the truth about themselves, they see through the difficulties also, and they see also their simplicity in accepting their innocence, and therefore they don't need our help beyond that, except to see who really, that they can find themselves within their simplicity, that they are there also in that peaceful place where we all really are. So as prayer is always for yourself, which we talked about last time, so is forgiveness always given you. So prayer is how we start. When we see that prayer is for ourselves to become peaceful, when we see that prayer for ourselves is to become more honest, when we see that prayer for ourselves is to become more joyful, when we see that prayer for ourselves is to become more peaceful, more loving, kind, and so on and so forth, then we see forgiveness also, because that's what forgiveness is. That's how we know forgiveness, because that's what's given to us when we see the truth. The truth is what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is the peace, the joy, and the kindness that we are shown in the truth, in the enlightenment of the realization that there isn't any harm, and there are only illusions to look at that seem to be harmful, and we can look past them and beyond them to be truly helpful, to allow others to also see the simplicity of the truth. So it's impossible to forgive another, for it is only your sins that you see in him, if it is impossible. It is impossible only then, is what I would think that this really is what it's saying to me anyway. You want to see them there and not in you. And that is why forgiveness of another is an illusion. Yet it is only a happy dream in all the world, and the only one that does not lead to death. Only in someone else can you find forgiveness for yourself, for you have called him guilty of your sins, and in him must your innocence now be found. So
I don't get that.
Okay. So who but the sinful need to be forgiven? And do not ever think you can see sin in anyone except yourself. Now, I think it was Sheila that said that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you then. So what do you prefer to see, other than that when you see your brother as not sinful, that you also can see that you have forgiven yourself?
If I'm saying that I see someone,
so the vision of someone is now occupying your mind, so that when you think about them, when you see them in your mind, you see them as sinful, you see them as harmful, you see them as destructive, you see them as perhaps violent, or you see them as or just wrong, or you hold a grudge against them, or you have a bitterness about them, and that's what you see.
Yeah,
so
that's what I see.
So then can you see that you have not forgiven yourself then for holding on to that?
Okay, got it.
So when I choose to see that about someone else, then what I'm choosing to see is that I haven't yet forgiven myself. I prefer to look at it as that I can learn to forgive myself. It's probably a lot easier to see it that way. In my opinion, it seems to be a lot easier to see it that way. I can do things in such a way as to protect myself in the meantime, so that I can be strengthened as I go through this process of seeing forgiveness for myself, for holding on to the importance in my mind that it was more important for me to see someone in terms of that I hold a grudge and a bitterness about them, that I thought that was more important than my own peace and my own joy and my own ability to be able to show kindness and to enjoy those that I love. That's what
Okay.
it me of. Okay, so
I was reading that as taking on their sins.
no, yes, in a sense we are, but we're really not doing that. What we're really doing is we're holding against ourselves the fact that we have to see them as harmful to ourselves, like as if that has to continue. We may have
Okay.
seen them as harmful. In fact, they may have done things that are, in a sense, unforgivable, but we don't need to see that that's what we have to still continue to suffer with. That's the victimizer in our mind, making us the victim. That's the victimizer's thinking. The
Okay.
victimizer is always thinking that we're going to be a victim because of what we suffered from. And
Okay.
in the Four Agreements, we call that the parasite
Domestic.
or the judge. And in
Yeah.
the 12 steps, we see that as we have character flaws. We have an inability to see past our grudges.
Okay.
Okay. So this is the great deception then of the world, that you would deceive yourself. You become the great deceiver of your own self. It always seems to be another who is evil, and in his sin you are injured. He could be free. How can freedom be possible if this were so? I better let somebody else read because I keep on messing up. I'm going too fast in my mind with something else, I think. All right, let me slow down. Let me try this. You would be slave to everyone, for what he does entails your fate, your feelings, your despair or hope, your misery or joy. You have no freedom unless he gives it to you. And being evil, he can only give you what he is. You cannot see his sin and not your own, but you can free him and yourself as well. So this is the way the Course puts it, because the Course wants us to see that, in fact, everything is about you. Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're believing, whatever you're interpreting, that's all about you. Everything that we see about someone else is really about ourselves. We see the copy that we have made about them in our mind, and we make that real as if we have control of it, as if it has to do our bidding, as if we can be made happy if it would only do what we want it to do. And there you begin to see the addiction, the obsession, and the need to drink, or the need to drug, or the need to gamble, or the need to whatever else. You see, you have to put it aside. And the only way that you know how to do it, because you're doing this to yourself, is to escape from yourself. The Course says, don't do that. Come to this simple, peaceful place within instead, and learn how to actually let go of your suffering, because you're holding on to it. You're victimizing yourself. And because you're victimizing yourself, you don't see clearly the path of enlightenment, which says, if you only come to a peacefulness about this, then it's a simple matter of seeing that you don't have to include this in your life anymore, that you've made yourself miserable by believing that you have to continue to do the suffering of what it has happened to you, and you do not have to do that anymore. So it becomes far more simple, and it becomes even simpler than that. It becomes as simple as forgetting it altogether and remembering a greater truth of that we are not actually separated from our peacefulness and our joy of knowing the simple truth that keeps us free. We can be at that place also. Would somebody like to continue from here with the part here about prayer?
I can, Eric.
Thank you, Diane.
Prayer is a way of asking for something. It is the medium of miracles, but the only meaningful prayer is for forgiveness, because those who have been forgiven have everything. Once forgiveness has been accepted, prayer in the usual sense becomes utterly meaningless. The prayer for forgiveness is nothing more than a request that you may be able to recognize what you already have. Look on your brother with a willingness to see him as he is, and do not keep a part of him outside your willingness that he be healed. To heal is to make whole, and what is whole can have no missing parts that have been kept outside. Forgiveness rests on recognizing this and being glad there cannot be some forms of sickness which the miracle must lack the power to heal. God's Son is perfect, or he cannot be God's Son. There is no way to think of him but this, if you would know the truth about yourself. I thank you, Father, for your perfect Son, and in his glory will I see my own. Perception is a continual process of accepting and rejecting, organizing and reorganizing, shifting and changing. Evaluation is an essential part of perception because judgments are necessary in order to select. Forgiveness is the healing of the perception of separation. As long as perception lasts, prayer has a place. Since perception rests on lack, those who perceive have not totally accepted the atonement and given themselves over to truth. Peace perception is based on a separated state, so that anyone who perceives at all needs healing. Communion, not prayer, is the natural state of those who know. As long as perception lasts, prayer has a place. Since perception rests on lack, those who perceive have not totally accepted the atonement and given themselves over to truth. Perception is based on a separated state, so that anyone who perceives at all needs healing. Communion, not prayer, is the natural state of those who know. God and his miracle are inseparable. How beautiful indeed are the thoughts of God who live in his light. Your worth is beyond perception because it is beyond doubt. Do not perceive yourself in different lights. Know yourself in one light where the miracle that is you is perfectly clear.
Thank you, Diane. So in today's continuation of forgiveness of yourself, we want to keep in mind now that when we're talking about forgiveness of ourselves, we're talking about the ease now of realizing that there's no difficulty outside ourselves, which is more important than this peace within ourselves. So we choose now, rightly in right-mindedness, we choose now the simplicity. We choose the simple way of seeing things. If I really do see that the battle is outside myself, how am I supposed to be able to control my behavior? How am I supposed to be able to control my thoughts? How am I supposed to be able to control my situation and circumstance when everything is beyond my control? Here in the simplicity of peace, nothing is beyond my control. And here in the simplicity of peace, when I see the difficulty outside myself with so-and-so and with such and such and this and that, then I simply do nothing. I simply watch and wait for the opportunity to share my peacefulness, to share my joy, to share the kindness of my genuine authenticity. That's all that's required of me in the truth. I remain there in the truth then, and I see no need to act in such a way as that I have no control of staying within my truth, staying within peace, staying within this kindness to be genuine, authentic, rather than to change the truth such as that I have to do something in such a way as to rescue some people or to straighten some people out or to make some other use of the untruth, which is to use the illusion as though it's real. So I begin to see that I've been making a mistake for a long time now, seeing that the world outside myself seems to be more important than this peacefulness, which leads to the simplicity of the truth, that I can only act in genuine and authentic ways to be helpful, when in fact my help can lead to this peaceful truth that I can actually share with someone. I can't actually share with someone the peaceful truth if what I have to do is defend what I did before and what I think now and so on and so forth. It's easy to get lost when I do that, and therefore I will be removed quickly from the truth because my decision is not to be truthful. And because of that, I also forget the truth And so therefore, I don't remember what it is that I decided to do. And I find myself in quite a pickle because in fact, there's no real salvation found in that when we take up and try to be the salvation ourselves for what isn't real. We cannot save the illusion. We cannot make it real. We cannot fix it. It is beyond our control. And it is so beyond our control because it is the past and it doesn't really exist. Everything that we do is interacting with the past in the world outside ourselves. It just does not exist in the present, in the truth, in reality, where everything is peacefully able to stay within the truth because that's what its choice is. So this process, if we've been doing it, that we've been getting up every day and we've been deciding to make our choices with spirit today to have the kind of day we want and stay within our peace, then we probably have been noticing that we can overlook a whole lot of what's going on because in fact, it doesn't need us because there's no call there for anything that's genuine or anything that's authentic that arises in us to see that in fact, we can increase the truth as we act or as we say or as whatever we do. So let's try to stay within that peacefulness of the truth that we can see that whatever we do say and whatever we do can be used to increase the peace and the truth and the joy within our minds. And to share that then makes good sense. So would somebody like to read the next section here about the rest of forgiveness of yourself?
I can do that, Eric.
Sheila, go ahead. I think somebody else spoke, but we'll get back to you next time.
Forgiveness truly given is the way in which your only hope of freedom lies. Others will make mistakes, and so will you, as long as this illusion of a world appears to be your home. Yet God himself has given all his sons a remedy for all illusions that they think they see. Christ's vision does not use your eyes, but you can look through his and learn to see like him. Mistakes are tiny shadows, quickly gone, for an instant only seem to hide the face of Christ, which still remains unchanged behind them all. His constancy remains in tranquil silence and in perfect peace. He does not know of shadows. His the eyes that look past error to the Christ in you. Ask then his help and ask him how to learn forgiveness as his vision lets it be. You are in need of what he gives, and your salvation rests on learning this of him. Prayer cannot be released to heaven while forgiveness to destroy remains with you. God's mercy would remove this withering and poisoned thinking from your holy mind. Christ has forgiven you, and in his sight the world becomes as holy as himself. Who sees no evil in it sees like him. For what he has forgiven has not sinned, and guilt can be no more. Salvation's plan is made complete, and sanity has come. The choices we make are limited by the probable realities of experiences in time. More possibility is more confusion. There are a huge number of potential states. However, in a present space, you manifest only a few. Thus, there are a limited number of choices because the physical world has physical limitations that depend upon the present state. Every choice is connected to mental states. When we choose innocence, perceptions calling for judgments are suspended. We are free to choose forgiveness. Practicing forgiveness, we learn this. Thus, we come into knowing about our completeness and spirit's innocence. By recognizing spirit, miracles adjust the levels of perception and show them in proper alignment. This places spirit at the center, which it can communicate directly.
So I wanted to point out here this as links to an article by Ken Wapnick. The title is "I Will Forgive But Never Forget." And it's actually the first part of several parts of an article. And this one is 4 pages long. Each section is 2 or 3 pages or 4 pages long. If you want to see the rest of it, you simply need to cut off the website name here to get to the original. Well, no, actually, I have to give it to you in an email. I see. I didn't actually I used a copy of it. So actually, this doesn't go to the original article. This goes to a PDF that's stored on the cloud. And I forgot that I did that. So I can send you the link for the rest of this because it was actually a workshop. I think there was 5 or 6 parts of it. So it's really a 20-page article, which really was a weekend retreat of some kind where Ken talked about forgiveness. Ken talks about forgiveness. He started out just like us, basically. He met Helen and met Bill, and they had completed the Course in Miracles with the transcription, and they had now in a binder, was typed up, and now it needed to be organized into the book. And they had been a couple other places, and they had a couple other things going on in the fire. And when Helen met with Ken and Bill, then they began to see that Ken was the right man for the job. And so the other fires that were in the making, they also came to completions, and that's why there's a couple other versions of A Course in Miracles. This is the one I stick with, and this is the one that I choose to stick with. As I look at the other ones and learn more about them, I keep coming back to saying, well, I'm going to stick with this one because this one is the simplest one, and also the most complete in the way that really matters. The edition that the Circle of Atonement has is, in a way, far more complete, but it also looks at a lot of irrelevant things that had nothing to do with teaching A Course in Miracles, had to do mostly with what Bill and Helen were going through during the process of it. And so I tend to stick away from that one, especially for beginners. There are some things in it, though, that people that get more advanced will probably appreciate. And so I'm not talking down about it. I'm just saying that isn't the right thing for me to use as a teacher. And I appreciate the hard work that was put into that book, though. And I appreciate the fact that there is some advanced use of it also, because some of the things that were pulled out to put into the Song of Prayer or to the pamphlet for psychotherapy and so on and so forth are included in the main body of that. And so some of the chapters are kind of beefed up in a sense, but it's a little more advanced stuff in earlier chapters. And I'm not sure what good it does for people that are beginning. I don't think it's that useful anyway. So I stick with this one, and I probably always will as a teacher. I probably always will say, use the other ones after, at your own pace, whatever liking that you have to find. If you happen to do research like I do and make something out of this that makes greater and greater sense to you, then you'll find there's an easier way to do that by allowing yourself to see that as that you have a way for yourself to do that. Let's continue with the next page here. This is the end of Forgiveness of Yourself, and somebody can read right through the end of this page also. And we'll pick up then with the next section, which is Forgiveness to Destroy, which is the ego's way of seeing things. Somebody had volunteered before, but I cut you off.
Yeah, Eric, this is Diane. I was
Good.
offering to continue. Would you like me to read?
Yes.
Forgiveness is the call to sanity. For who but the insane would look on sin when he could see the face of Christ instead? This is the choice you make, the simplest one, and yet the only one that you can make. God calls on you to save his son from death by offering Christ's love to him. This is your need, and God holds out his gift to you. As he would give, so must you give as well. And thus his prayer restored to formlessness, beyond all limits into timelessness, with nothing of the past to hold it back from you reuniting with the ceaseless song that all creation sings unto its God. But to achieve this end, you must learn before you reach where learning cannot go. Forgiveness is the key, but who can use a key when he has lost the door for which the key was made, and where alone it fits? Forgiveness' role must be reversed and cleansed from evil usage and hateful goals. Forgiveness to destroy must be unveiled in all its treachery and then let go forever and forever. There can be no trace of it remaining if the plan that God established for returning be achieved at last and learning be complete. This is the world of opposites, and you must choose between them every instant while this world retains reality for you. Yet you must learn alternatives for choice, or you will not be able to attain your freedom. Let it be then clear to you exactly what forgiveness means to you, and learn what it should be to set you free. The level of your prayer depends on this, for here it waits its freedom to ascend above the world of chaos into peace. Everyone is free to refuse to accept his inheritance, but he is not free to establish what his inheritance is. There is no one who does not feel that he is imprisoned in some way. If this is the result of his own free will, he must regard his will as not free, or the circular reasoning in this position would be quite apparent. Free will must lead to freedom. Judgment always imprisons because it separates segments of reality by the unstable scales of desire. Today I claim the gifts forgiveness gives. I will not wait another day to find the treasures that my Father offers me. Illusions are all vain, and dreams are gone even while they are woven out of the thoughts that rest on the false perceptions. Let me not accept such meager gifts again today. God's voice is offering the peace of God to all who hear and choose to follow him. This is my choice today, and so I go to find the treasures of God has given me. I seek but the eternal, for your Son can be content with nothing less than this. What then can be his solace but what you are offering to his bewildered mind and frightened heart to give him certainty and bring him peace? Today I will behold my brother sinless. This is your will for me, for so will I behold my sinlessness.
Oftentimes I've found that I have some word for someone which I believe is helpful. I believe I'm being genuine, truly helpful, and I offer to them something, and they seem resistant, or even maybe it's upset sometimes because of whatever's going on, that they're still resisting in their own mind. So I've learned that, in fact, I should leave it alone rather than continue to try and make sure that they understood what it is that I'm saying, really. If when I hear the resistance, I ask myself to see if, in fact, I should continue onward, or if, in fact, I should be quiet and wait until that, again, that genuine, authentic realization of help seems to come to me. So I realize after a while, I realize that everything that we really need to do, or everything that we really need to see, and everything that we really understand actually really is just given to us. We really needn't work at it. What we really need to do is remain peaceful instead, and then we will notice more and more so that everything we need is actually given to us. Now, I notice that more so, I guess, because I'm inclined to do what I do, which is teaching and talking to people about things that they, that academic sort of things and stuff like that. I guess that's why I notice it that way. I did notice it somewhat at vocational training. I was as a teacher there too, but I noticed it more so when I began to use the Course in Miracles, or the 12 Steps, or the Four Agreements books. I began to see, then when I used those sort of things, I began to see more and more so how, in fact, that I need to wait until I actually see that coming to me is that I am therefore genuinely helpful, and I can see it as an opportunity differently than when I'm trying to see it. So I don't have to try to see it. I simply need to be relaxed and peaceful and realize the truth will be shown to me. And that's an honest experience that I see fairly often, actually. I still make mistakes a lot, and I still try to say things and do things and so on and so forth that I really should just wait patiently and see for the opportunity to be shown to me. But instead, I still push it a little bit sometimes. And having trouble with the microphone. Can you hear me okay, Daniela? Yes, okay, good. Good. Glad to hear that. So forgiveness to destroy is next. Now here is the ego's way of looking at forgiveness. If we didn't catch that yet, now I'll just point it out. The ego believes in forgiveness. Yes, it actually does. But the forgiveness that the ego believes in is that he is going to forgive us because of his grand, plan for us to be useful to him. This is what the ego is all about. So I'm going to forgive you because you can still be useful to me, is how the ego sees things. Or I'm going to forgive you because, in fact, you hold one over me and I'm being forced to forgive you. So it's forgiveness to destroy is what the Course calls it. And I think we'll see probably why it's called that if we didn't already see that as we read through this section on forgiveness to destroy. Who would like to read that?
I can go,
Thank
Eric, if you
Debbie.
like.
Can you see
I
it?
don't know who's,
Sorry.
I can't see who's on the call, so that's okay. I don't need to, of course, but I just don't know whether other people can't always hear whether other people are calling in. So that's good. Okay, forgiveness to destroy. Forgiveness to destroy has many forms, being a weapon of the world of form. Not all of them are obvious, and some are carefully concealed beneath what seems like charity. Yet all the forms that it may seem to have but this single goal. Their purpose is to separate and make what God created equal different. The difference is clear in several forms where the design comparison cannot be missed, nor is it really meant to be. In this group, first, there are the forms in which a better person designs to stoop to save a baser, one from what he truly is. Forgiveness here rests on an attitude of gracious lordliness, so far from love that arrogance could never be dislodged. Who can forgive and yet despise? And who can tell another he is steeped in sin and yet perceive him as the Son of God? What makes a slave to teach what freedom is? There is no union here, but only grief. There is no real mercy. This is death. Another form, still very like the first, if it is understood, does not appear in quite such a blatant arrogance. The one who would forgive the other does not claim to be the better. Now he says instead that there is one whose sinfulness he shares, since both have been unworthy and deserve the retribution of the wrath of God. This can appear to be a humble thought and may indeed induce a rivalry in sinfulness and guilt. It is not love for God's creation and that holiness that is his gift forever. Can his Son condemn himself and still remember him? Here's the goal, is to separate from God the Son he loves and keep him from his source. This goal is also sought by those who seek the role of martyr at another's hand. Here must the aim be clearly seen, for this may pass as meekness and as charity instead of cruelty. Is it not kind to be accepting of another's spite and not respond except with silence and a gentle smile? Behold, how good are you who bear with patience and with saintliness the anger and the hurt another gives, and do not show the bitter pain you feel. While we still believe we exist as separate individuals, however, Jesus teaches us that prayer will take the form that best suits our needs. It is a process with different levels corresponding to where we are on our journey back to our natural state of oneness with each other and with God. But it is always for ourselves. It is part of our atonement process. Prayer thus should be centered on forgiveness as much as possible, as it is the experience of forgiveness that leads us to the awareness that we already have what we need. Prayer in its earlier forms, asking out of need, is an illusion, because there is no need for a ladder to reach what one has never left. Yet prayer is part of forgiveness, As long as forgiveness itself an illusion remains unattained, prayer is tied up with the learning until the goal of learning has been reached, and then all things will be transformed together and return unblemished into the mind of God.
So forgiveness is actually like learning. And so when I have trouble with forgiveness, what is usually helpful is to, again, return to prayer. And even if I need to, just to return again to that section of the Song of Prayer, where in fact I see the relevance of prayer in terms of what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to allow me to come to a sense about enlightenment and peace. So I need not work hard at forgiveness when in fact I seem to be having difficulty with it. The struggle is actually in the showing to spirit what it is that I am having trouble with. That's what I'm not doing when in fact I'm holding on to the difficulty of it myself. So I hold on to it as though I have a victim or as though I am a victim. And this is what in fact causes me to not see forgiveness. It's me ruminating over the difficulties of my past and or me festering about the difficulties of what I'm going to do because of what's been done in the past. So it's an inability to separate myself from the past and connect myself with prayer that is in my way. Peacefulness is what I've lost. That's what I paid for the price in order to keep peace and joy and kindness out of my heart. I paid peace to do that. When I see, in fact, that I can bring all that suffering into this place of prayer and I can give it in return for peace, then in fact, I see that giving is receiving. And I see that a lot easier that way than when I saw it the opposite way, that the price of my suffering was my peace, to give it away. To give peace away is to bring suffering into my mind. To give my suffering away is to bring peace into my mind. When I begin to see the ease of that, then I begin to see that my mirror twisted way of understanding things needs to be replaced. And therefore I see the simplicity of prayer, and I see also the opportunity for forgiveness, not through forgiveness to destroy, although that may sometimes be the way that I prefer to kind of start out looking at things, is that I have an enemy. But in fact, when I begin to see that my enemy simply represents my own obstinance and my own obsession with doing it myself, I begin to see that in fact, if I would only rest in this peaceful sense of prayer, which I find in oftentimes in mindful meditations, guided meditations, or prayer, then I find myself coming to an ease of realizing that forgiveness is not to destroy, but forgiveness is to forget instead. So let's go on with the rest of forgiveness to destroy here, and we'll see if that leads us down to the understanding about how anger or sadness might stay in our way if we don't let go of forgiveness to destroy, that is. Somebody like to finish this?
Yeah, sure.
A bit this time. Yes.
Where are we up to? Forgiveness to destroy. Where are we up to?
Paragraph 5, yes. Forgiveness to destroy.
Sure. Forgiveness to destroy will often hide behind a cloak like this. It shows the face of suffering and pain in silent proof of guilt and of the ravages of sin. Such is the witness that it offers one who could be saviour, not an enemy. But having been made enemy, he must accept the guilt and heavy laid reproach that thus is put upon him. Is this love? Or is it rather treachery to one who needs salvation from the pain of guilt? What could the purpose be except to keep the witness of guilt away from love? Forgiveness to destroy can also take the form of bargaining and compromise. I will forgive you if you meet my needs, for in your slavery is my release. Say this to anyone and you are a slave, and you will seek to rid yourself of guilt in further bargains which can give no hope but only greater pain and misery. How fearful has forgiveness now become, and how distorted is the end it seeks. Have mercy on yourself who bargains thus. God forgives and does not ask for recompense. There is no giving but to give like him. All else is mockery, for who would not try to strike a bargain with the Son of God and thank his Father for his holiness? What would you show your brother? Would you try to reinforce his guilt and thus your own? Forgiveness is the means for your escape. How pitiful it is to make of the means for further slavery and pain. Within the world of opposites, there is a way to use forgiveness for the goal of God and find the peace he offers you. Take nothing else, or have you sought your death and prayed for separation from yourself? Christ is for all, because he is in all. It is his face forgiveness lets you see. It is his face in which you see your own. All forms forgiveness takes that do not lead away from anger, condemnation, and comparisons of every kind are death. For what is what their purposes have set? Be not deceived by that, but lay them as worthless in their tragic offerings. You do not want to stay in slavery. You do not want to be afraid of God. You want to see the sunlight and the glow of heaven shining on the face of earth, redeemed from the sin and the love of God. From here is prayer released, along with you. Your wings are free, and prayer will lift you up and bring you home where God would have you be. Anger accompanied by condemnation is at its core a dark and cruel wish for harm to come upon someone. So instead, we learn to forgive what is past. I can give up, but what was never real. We are learning in prayer and forgiveness. Illusions dissolve away as we pray. Father, to you all sacrifice remains forever inconceivable, and so I cannot sacrifice except in dreams. As you created me, I can give up nothing you gave me. What you did not give has no reality. What loss can I anticipate except the loss of fear and the return of love into my mind?
And I leave a link here also for the chapter section. This is from chapter 26. Section 3 is called the borderland, and you may remember it or not from our going through the chapter. I didn't really emphasize it very much at that time because at that time it may not have been really clear, and I was working on instead recognizing the gap or the space between my upset and my realization that I don't need to be upset. There's a space between that, or a gap between that, in which I realize that which I can stop and realize, pause and realize that I'm making more out of it than I need to, that in fact, I can see peace instead of that. And this is where what I had emphasized instead of the borderland. The borderland is really a description of that place in which we can realize ourselves to be making more out of our problems than we really need to see ourselves beyond them. We do need to see them, but we need to see them in a way that we can remain in this genuine authenticity about ourselves, where we're truly helpful to others and we're peaceful in ourselves. So that's the way we should look at things, and that's what the borderland sort of describes. So if you want to read that over again, that goes to that section. It probably will be more clear the more that you read it after seeing yourself through some of the other work that we've been doing since looking at chapters 26. It's called the borderland. It's about the complexity has nothing to do with God. It's about his simplicity instead. And here we have a section says that there is no conflict there at all. No sacrifice actually is possible. Sacrifice is actually a misunderstanding. It's a miscreation. It's a misrepresentation of the truth. It's a mere twisted reality that has nothing to do with the truth. And we begin to see that sacrifice is the ego's story about what it is that we need to do in order to see ourselves clear of our past, is to sacrifice it, to sacrifice ourselves because of it, and so on like that. And we begin to see that that has nothing to do with the reality. That is a simple misperception that we in our mind have created to see ourselves as important in the world outside ourselves, where we think that we belong when we are doing that, and we're working through that process that way. So that's the ego's way of thinking, in which we have to be separate in order to be happy, in which we have to acquire objects and things and prestige and esteem and so on and so forth from what we have and what we take. And in fact, it's totally the wrong way to go about thinking about salvation, and totally the wrong way to go about thinking about our being genuine and authentic and helpful, which leads us, instead of that, to this peaceful realization of the truth that forgiveness is for salvation, and that salvation, in fact, is not going to be represented by any way to be understood in the world outside ourselves. It is only, we are only able to understand it in this peaceful, timeless realization that the truth is not ever diminished by the structure and by the process of seeing the world outside ourselves as separate from ourselves. That only causes us to therefore see that peace and truth and right-mindedness and so on and so forth also are external to ourselves. So it's a total misrepresentation of what in fact the Course represents to us, is that this peace is from within, not from within our bodies, but from within our minds, as our minds change to see that the world outside ourselves is all about the past and all about failure and all about sacrifice of ourself for the purpose of saving something which cannot be saved, the illusion of the world outside ourselves. So let's read about forgiveness for salvation. If somebody would like to volunteer to read that part, it is still, yes, two pages to go. So this page and one more page ends that section and also ends this whole chapter. And we can pretty much read through that and then discuss what we want to as at the end of this.
I can pick up from here, Eric.
Thanks, Sheila.
Forgiveness for salvation. Forgiveness for salvation has one form and only one. It does not ask for proof of innocence nor pay of any kind. It does not argue nor evaluate errors that it wants to overlook. It does not offer gifts and treachery nor promise freedom while it asks for death. Would God deceive you? He but asks for trust and willingness to learn how to be free. He gives his teacher to whoever asks and seeks to understand the will of God. His readiness to give lies far beyond your understanding and your simple grasp. Yet he has willed you learn the way to him, and in his willing there is certainty. You, child of God, the gifts of God are yours, not by your plans, but by his holy will. His voice will teach you what forgiveness is and how to give it as he wills it be. Do not then seek to understand what is beyond you yet, but let it be a way to draw you up to where the eyes of Christ become the sight you choose. Give up all else, for there is nothing else. When someone calls for help in any form, he is the one to answer you. All that you need do is step back and not interfere. Forgiveness for salvation is his task, and it is he who will respond to you. Do not establish what the form should be that Christ's forgiveness takes. He knows the way to make of every cell a call help to you as you rise in haste to go at last until your Father's house. Now can he make your footsteps sure, your words sincere, not with your own sincerity, but with his own. Let him take charge of how you would forgive, and each occasion then will be to you another step to heaven and to peace. I gladly make the sacrifice of fear. Here is the only sacrifice you ask of your beloved Son. You ask him to give up all suffering, all sense of loss and sadness, all anxiety and doubt, and freely let your love come streaming into his awareness, healing him of pain and giving him your own eternal joy. Such is the sacrifice you ask of me, and one I gladly make, the only cost of restoration of your memory to me for the salvation of the world. Are you not weary of imprisonment? God did not choose this sorry path for you. What you have chosen still can be undone, for prayer is merciful and God is just. His is a justice he can understand, but you cannot as yet. Still will he give the means to you to learn of him, and know at last that condemnation is not real and makes illusions in its evil name. And yet it matters not the form that dreams may seem to take. Illusions are untrue. God's will is truth, and you are one with him in will and purpose. Here all dreams are done. What should I do for him, your holy son? Should be the only thing you ever ask when help is needed and forgiveness sought. The form the seeking takes you need not judge, and let it not be you who sets the form in which forgiveness comes to save God's Son. The light of Christ in him is his release, and it is this that answers to his call. Forgive him as the Christ decides you should, and be his eyes through which you look on him and speak for him as well. He knows the need, the question, and the answer. He will say exactly what to do in words that you can understand and you can also use. Do not confuse his function with your own. He is the answer. You are the one who hears. And what is it he speaks to you about? About salvation and the gift of peace, about the end of sin and guilt and death, about the role forgiveness has in him. Do you but listen, for he will be heard by anyone who calls upon his name and places his forgiveness in his hands. Forgiveness has been given him to teach, to save it from destruction, and to make the means for separation, sin, and death become again the holy gift of God. Prayer is his own right hand, made free to save as true forgiveness is allowed to come from his eternal vigilance and love. Listen and learn and do not judge. It is to God you turn to hear what you should do. His answer will be clear as morning, nor his forgiveness what you think it is. Still does he know, and that should be enough. Forgiveness has a teacher who will fail in nothing. Rest a while in this. Do not attempt to judge forgiveness, nor to set it in an earthly frame. Let it arise to Christ, who welcomes it as a gift to him. He will not leave you comfortless, nor fail to send angels down to answer you in his own name. He stands beside the door to which forgiveness is the only key. Give it to him to use instead of you, and you will see the door swing silently open upon the shining face of Christ. Behold your brother there beyond the door, the Son of God as he created him. I need you to scroll a little bit, Eric, please. You will receive everything you need when you stop asking for what you do not need. Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj.
And I never even tried to say his name. You did say it beautifully. I couldn't even try. So this is the end of the forgiveness part of the Song of Prayer. And I think we may perhaps begin to see the simplicity now of the use of prayer, because the only use of prayer really is to see that we have learned about forgiveness. The need for prayer is to see that there is no need for forgiveness, to see forgiveness whole, to see the whole truth as it's shown to us at whatever level we need. The truth is always shown to us. Nothing's actually hidden from us, but our mind is only interested in what it seems to need. So in fact, when it has a need and we ask properly through prayer, then we will be shown what it is that we need. And as we're shown what it is that we need, then the resistance to seeing that will diminish, and the usefulness of it will become apparent to us. In other words, it will be simplified as to what we're to do. It will be far more simplified. My recommendation is just keep yourself back from whatever seems to be upsetting, to the point of not ignoring it, not pretending it's not there or something like that, or for the point of being able to look at it when you're peaceful and being able to see it in the light of peace. You may see, in fact, that you can forgive your part in it, whatever it was. You're holding on to something is the reason why it still bothers you so much. If it bothers you about somebody in your past, or if it bothers you about something that happened yesterday, it's the same thing. It makes no difference. Whatever your mind is occupied with, that you're holding on to, that represents to you suffering, that's what, in fact, your mind doesn't need. Your mind needs to let go of that. And it's easy to let go of it if, in fact, you come to peacefulness first, and then look at the fact of that you thought you had a need to suffer, but obviously that must be wrong. And then to see, in fact, that you can ask for a more honest way to see your way through whatever was seemingly upsetting you before, because you needn't have that now. You can go on with your life in terms of what is more meaningful to you in light of peace. Staying within the light of peace allows you to see what's more meaningful for staying within the light of peace, is the easier way to say that, perhaps. So that's the easiest way to look at what it is I'm learning from the Course in Miracles, is to stay within the light of peace in order to increase the awareness of the light of peace in my mind. Everything becomes easier that way.
Eric, can I just ask, the way I'm seeing things is, firstly, I have this thoughts are prayers. So everything we think are prayers. I'm also seeing that we don't pray for anyone else because that's their trajectory, and we don't, we're sort of then showing that we're not having trust that all is well and all is happening for people's highest good. So we don't need forgiveness because everyone's a mirror of ourselves. And so that's kind of how I see things. And so I have been looking for the reason for prayer. I can see that, that if we need clarity, we want to ask for something like that. Maybe we want to, have that conversation. But if thoughts are prayers, then can you?
Is that consistency increasing in your mind, Debbie? Because that's what prayer is.
Sorry?
Prayer is the increasing of that consistency of the peaceful truth in my mind. That's what prayer really is. I can share that more easily with others, the more peacefully calm and consistently true that is in my mind, then the more easy it is for me to share it with others. If that seems to be increasing, then obviously I'm praying.
Right. And because, yes, we're choosing how we want to have our days as well. So I suppose I was with all that context, wanting to know why people pray. With that context, it's almost like if I saw prayer in that context, it would be like, oh, right, now I'll go and pray. It's like it's almost going back to duality and separating from the rest of our life. So I was trying to understand, the old trying. If I just blanketly said, oh, okay, why do we pray? What's the point of prayer? What would you say?
We pray for forgiveness. We pray for healing. We pray for the miracle awareness of that there isn't any problems outside of ourselves that are more important than the truth. We pray for the realization that the truth will always serve us well when we, in fact, remain in this peacefulness. This is what we pray for. We needn't, therefore, stop. We may continue along our way doing what we do if that's what, in fact, our experience is, because that is a continuous prayer. Prayer is ceaseless, and prayer is always the truth. So prayer is a realization of the truth also then. So prayer doesn't go away. In other words, prayer is the necessity of the completion of ourself. To know ourself as one with God is what our prayer is. Our prayer, therefore, is not separated from our source. And this is what you're noticing, is that giving and receiving are the same thing. In fact, they're not separated. The source of our truth is not separated from the peace of our truth. The realization of our truth is not separated from our actions in our truth, as we are in that light of truth. So there is no separation between prayer and the truth.
Yeah. And so if we're already forgiven, we're already healed, we're already whole, we're already complete, we're already, so it's yeah. So
there's nothing to work out. In fact, that's just the simplicity of it is to celebrate that simplicity, to relax and be peaceful in that simplicity, and to use your time to more clearly communicate to yourself what your needs are, and to more clearly communicate to others how you see them as peacefully able, just like you, to be able to accept the truth. You trust them to be able to do it, and so on, like that is easy for you then. Even if they seem not to be able to do that, it can't be too far from, nobody is too far really from the ability to be able to manage themselves peacefully. There's nobody really far from that. And we can see that when we're in peace.
And so if we have an attitude of gratitude, and we might choose to, occasionally write some gratitude, why we're gratitude. So is there then any need to, again, I don't mean this to because sometimes I want to just acknowledge creator, source, universe, for all the blessings and the beauty and everything. And I can, of course, that's okay. But if we're already feeling that, believing that, having the gratitude, is that in itself a prayer as well? I sometimes think, oh gosh, I haven't, done any literal prayer, like I've, separate from how I'm being every day, or, in any moment or what have you. So, yeah, I guess that a little bit of confusion comes in there. It's almost like, oh, do I need to be also making it a separate ritual or such?
Rituals and traditions and steps and so on and so forth is the way we learn it. In truth, the way that is most natural is, in fact, that there's no separation between the truth and prayer, because they're the same thing. There's no separation between the peace and the joy of giving peace to others, because they're the same thing. So there's no separation between the giving and the receiving, when in fact we're connected with our source in realization of this light of truth and this peace of truth and this joy of being able to remain there in our mind. I'm no longer needing to do something about something outside myself. I am at service to those that are outside myself, when in fact I see their need inside myself. So rather than try to manifest something that has to do with, well, their stories and stuff like that, I'm not really looking at the importance of that. I'm looking at the importance of what they're really calling for. They really want peace, and they really want kindness, and they really want acceptance of that they have the same needs that I have. Let's be able to be peaceful with each other and calm and relax and grow in that together, rather than find obstacles and differences and difficulties. So there's no changing in timeless awareness. There's no changes that need to be addressed. In the world outside ourselves, where there's constant change, because that's how that it appears that way, that it's outside ourselves, because it constantly changes, then in fact it seems that we always have to reduce the truth to that particular image of what's happening now out there. So, but that's past. It's perception, and all perception is past. So the Course is helping us to see, or our other experiences in peacefulness is helping us to see that we don't really need to consider the past when we need to realize that we're losing peace, we're losing our kindness, we're losing our joy about ourselves. And therefore, it must be that we're working on something other than this prayer that we're talking about today, this forgiveness that we're talking about today.
Right.
We're working on the separated system that says, oh, you're different from me, your needs are different from me, and I don't really understand you today, or I really can't help you today, or I really think you must do this in order to be on my good side again. And these sort of things that we do by reducing the truth to some image about ourselves that isn't real. It's based on,
yeah. And the forgiveness. So I remember hearing something a long time ago, and it just feels true, is that to forgive and not forget is really to not forgive. So I just saw, when you saw that 20-page document there, to forgive and forget, I forgive but don't forget. That just came back to me that, well, if we're not forgetting, then we're not forgiving. So,
He's really not going to. He's really not going to say that we needn't forgive, or
yeah,
that we
I
wouldn't
imagine
forget. We're going to forget what's unimportant, and we're going to remember what is important. So, we start out with simple rules like courteousness and so on like that. And then we move onwards to a higher level of thinking, where thought isn't any more distorted, where there isn't any opposition anymore. In this peaceful realization of the truth, then forgiveness is whole. And so then is it not really forgiveness anymore. It's really moving on from that into seeing things only in peace, and seeing things only through through this way of understanding that all obstacles to peace are in the mind, which is confused and disoriented and dissociated from its truth.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you, Eric.
Yes, thank you. Anybody else?
It's a lot to take in.
Okay. Did you see in the earlier part where you were asking about the forgiveness, you saw the opposite of it. And then when you saw the opposite of it, you saw that you made the opposite of it in terms of how important that is to you. So this is what we're forgiving. We're forgiving holding on to that's important to us. It's only important to let it go. It's not important to hold on to it. We see the details of it, and we punish ourselves again and again and again for not letting go of it. That's what we're actually punishing ourselves for. We're not punishing ourselves because of what happened. We're actually punishing ourselves because we hold on to how it hurt, then as if it hurts more all the time. And it can't really hurt more all the time, but it only does because we hold on to it as if we need to not forgive it. So when we say that we're forgiving it, we're saying that we're letting go of that part of ourselves that needs to suffer over what had happened in the past. I did make a lot of bad decisions in my past, believe me. And I saw, in fact, that I caused other people in my mind to suffer. I see now that I didn't really cause them to suffer, but in fact, I was contributing, that's for sure, to suffering because I was suffering. So I saw that I made my part of it that contributed to the suffering of me and other individuals at the time. I can't really change that as it would be in somebody else's mind. I have to allow myself to see that it needn't be in their mind to torment me in my mind. If you see what I'm saying.
Yes, I do.
Okay. So I don't hold on to what I believe about them. I hold on to instead the truth about myself is that I can let that go. It's of no importance that we suffered. It's of importance that we respect each other to the best of our ability, or that we keep our distance if we need to do that in order to respect each other. So we'll go by the rules if we need to, or we'll go by the truth if possible. But I won't break the truth to go by the rules either. I'll stay within my truth. I think you said that to me back some time ago also, that as you see your truth, you want to stay within that, what you see to be true about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I really like what you just said then, Eric. Actually, it's just like I hadn't really thought about that, but we don't, as long as we're in truth, we don't need rules, but the rules come in when we are clouded or confused or such. We have those rules as a guidepost. Yes. If that was required. Yeah, that's really good. I hadn't thought of that really. It's like I think of rules that you learn the rules. Sorry?
I can't manage it myself. I need rules.
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea because I suppose I've had. Yeah, well, we learn things. We learn, say, rules, or we learn concepts, paradigms, and then we throw them away once we've kind of, we've had something embodied. We then throw them away. But I can see how, of course, we're not always 100% embodied in love, and so it's awesome to have some kind of guidance, rules, if you like. to remember to bring us back to the truth. So
So
I hadn't really thought that way.
we ended up that way. We ended up to be in our minds to be able to be neutral. Otherwise, if not positively encouraging the increasing of peace and joy and kindness, then we at least can be neutral. And so oftentimes we needn't do anything really then, except wait for the opportunity to see that we can be helpful. So
Yeah,
can't be helpful
I like
to somebody that's still living in their suffering. I can't be helpful to them if that's what they choose to do. I can say many times, and I probably will say many times, that we hold on to our own suffering, we make our problems worse than they are, and things like that. And if they can't really see that and hold on to that, there's something about that I needed to understand, then they won't do that themselves. Long ago, I heard somebody say at an AA meeting, I heard somebody say that they had learned to live within the solution instead of to working on the problem all the time. And I thought to myself, I don't know what the hell that means, but I'm going to figure that out, because that sounds pretty darn interesting to me. And I think it's true, but I don't get it really. So I looked at it, and I kept on looking into it until it made complete sense to me that I have to bring my problems into the solution rather than that I have to stop what I'm doing, decrease my awareness of the truth in order to be dealing with a problem that somebody has, or a problem that something has cropped up or whatever has changed to make something difficult. There can't be any difficulties in the truth. So I learn more and more all the time to remain there until I see that there can't be any difficulty with this problem either. And that means sometimes that I'm saying, I'm sorry, we'll wait, we'll get to that soon. As soon as I can, I'll be with you and we'll talk about that more or whatever. So I say what I have to say, what I think is useful. I let that time go by where the mind can work on what it is that perhaps is useful to them. And then I come back at another time later, and I've learned this is a lot easier than the way I used to try to do it, which is like, we get it all done now. You don't understand what I'm saying. That didn't work. That did not work.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just as you said before, that when you feel yourself trying, then you need to stop and just allow, So, yeah.
Sometimes people just catch to something that they like and that they agree with, and then their mind just takes them right into what they needed.
Yeah.
You don't need to say anything then.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Awesome. So
I'm not fixing us. I'm the one that's trying to enjoy it, just like everybody else. We all should try to enjoy it.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's really awesome. So yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Well,
yeah.
Thank you. I always enjoy your questions, and your Sheila also, and everybody reading for me makes my life a lot easier, because something about that. When I'm reading and I'm doing this, it's difficult for some reason for me to read. So I appreciate that you guys do that for me.
Yeah, well, that's the
You're
least we
welcome.
can do, Eric. Yes, indeed. It's beautiful to have this opportunity. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And next week we'll finish up the Song of Prayer, and we'll get on with